Well, what I always like to ask people who want to think about Iran is everybody, we've all seen thousands of Iranians in the streets of their cities chanting death to America. Right? This is the official mantra. Death to America, death to America. If you watch Hezbollah greatest hits on YouTube, you'll find the same thing, Nasrallah leading people in the same chant, death to America, death to America. So what do you think they mean? What does it mean? And generally the discussion ends right there because we don't take it seriously. And as Jim said, all three of these great people have said, Iran has been because there's Frank, Iran's been waging war against us since 1979. And I always get a chuckle when I see articles saying, should we go to war with Iran? But the war is on. The war has been on. Americans are being killed every day by the Iranian regime, every day. Go to Bethesda Naval Hospital, go to Walter Reed, talk to survivors of attacks from Iranian IEDs and Iranian EFPs. They'll tell you the war is on, and they'll tell you with whom we're fighting. And yet that notion that we are at war with Iran never makes the center of the debates that go on in this capital, which is a true scandal, because it's long enough. I mean, 10 years, 20 years, okay. 30 years, 33 years, it's time to get there. It's time to address it. And of course, as usual, when there are problems, if you don't address them, they tend to get worse. And this one's gotten a lot worse. And what we are facing now is a global alliance between radical Islamists and radical leftists. It's a totalitarian alliance. We know about it. It's a very old sort of thing. And this alliance stretches from China to Russia to Iran to Syria to Venezuela, Venezuela, Bolivia, and various other South American countries. As Ken said, Hezbollah is coming across the border into the United States, and Hezbollah gets there through Caracas. There's this regular fight that goes Tehran, Damascus, Caracas, and there are various things on that plane which do not go through Venezuelan customs, and people get off that plane, and we do not know who they are. What we do know is that many of them were given Venezuelan passports, and they're gone. And if you look at that part of the world, the tri-border area and so forth, you will see a surprising development, namely the proliferation of Shiite mosques, which is not an old South American tradition, and which is not likely to be a spontaneous conversion on the part of previously believing Catholics to the most obscure form of Islam. And yet that's going on, and we know that all over the world those mosques are used as recruiting and training and arming and funding centers for terrorist organizations, and you can be quite sure that that sort of thing is going on there. We also know about Venezuela that there are now Iranian UAVs based in Venezuela. Venezuela is as close to the United States as Cuba. We are told, although I haven't seen final confirmation yet, but there are reasonable, sensible people who say that there are now Iranian missiles in Venezuela. So if you thought the Cuban Missile Crisis was fun, you can contemplate the glories of a Venezuelan missile crisis. And as Jim said, Castro really wanted to go to war with the United States, desperately, eagerly, fanatically. He was not a radical Muslim. He wanted to destroy America, and he didn't care if his country was destroyed in the act of destroying America. Well, Hugo Chavez really has very little left to lose. He's dying. He's on a countdown also. Is it weeks, months, or years? Who knows? Medicine is not a precise science. But these are people who are quite eager to embrace the destruction of America. Death to America is a war cry, and they are at war. And this is a war that we have to win. We haven't even recognized the existence of this war, let alone thought about a winning strategy for it. As Ken says, one big component part of that winning strategy has to be bringing down the regime in Iran. I marvel at the fact that our leaders have said that Mubarak must go, and then that Gaddafi must go, and recently, reluctantly and sadly, Assad must go. They've never said that Khamenei and Ahmadinejad must go. Never. And yet, that's the main enemy. So why is it that we have so gulled ourselves and so deceived ourselves in the way that we look at the world that we are prepared to advocate the downfall of friendly tyrants, but we are not prepared to advocate the downfall of hostile tyrants? Why won't we confront our enemies? And yet, our enemies, the hell of it is, that the Iranian regime is hollow, and it's ready to be had. All this talk about going to war with Iran, bombing Iran, invading Iran, I don't know what else. I mean, we brought down the Soviet Empire, which was something real and big and powerful, with the active support of maybe 5 or 10% of the Soviet people. Maybe. And that was an implosion. That was not military warfare. The air went out of its balloon and it just died. Right? Was one of the great moments of my life was sitting in front of the television set with son Gabriel, watching that scene in front of the White House in Moscow, and I said to him, Gabriel, watch this. You are about to see the communist empire die. And it died right then and there, and nobody fired. Right? Now, in Iran, which is immeasurably weaker than the Soviet Union was, and where they have armed forces that are by no means willing to fight. They use proxies. They don't send Iranians to attack us. Very rarely that an Iranian himself actually shows up on the battlefield, and one is hard-pressed to find an Iranian suicide terrorist. I can't think of one.
They use Arabs?
They use Arabs. They hate Arabs. They use, as they call it, stupid Arabs. They recruit Arabs, they train Arabs, and when an Arab blows himself up in front of some Western target, they get a double thrill, yes. Right, they say, A, they killed some of us, and B, some stupid Arab did it, right? Their language, not mine. Some of my best friends are smart Arabs. So it's every bit as hollow. It's more hollow than the Soviet Union was. Plus, we've got 70, 80, who knows, 90% of Iranians on our side. Furthermore, to use a phrase from the Cold War, the Iranian people have been vaccinated against radical Islam. Amen. Right? They've had, Kissinger used to say, well, maybe if we let Portugal go communist, remember? If we let Portugal go communist, it might on balance be not such a terrible thing because we could isolate them from NATO secrets, et cetera, and in the meantime, everybody would see how bad communism is, and NATO would be vaccinated. Well, Iran is vaccinated. If the Iranian people had a free election today, a person with a turban would not be elected to anything. They want to send the mullahs back to the mosques. They want secular people to govern the country. That's the tradition, by the way, of Shiite Islam, and that's a long-standing Iranian tradition. And the Iranians, unlike some of the radical Islamists in other countries in the Middle East, have long believed that there should be separation between mosque and state. And they are constitution writers. If you look at the Iranian Constitution of 1906, you will find something that's actually serviceable even for today. It's very good. So we've got a lot to work with. I believe I sometimes think that I'm the only revolutionary conservative left in Washington. There used to be left-wing revolutionaries, but they're all gone because the lefties are all reactionaries now. They're all defenders of the status quo. They're all defending the tyrants. They don't want revolution anywhere. And yet, I believe that America's the one and only revolutionary country in the world, and it's our greatest weapon against these people. And for extras, I am a Marine dad, and Marine dads don't want us to invade other countries, don't want us going to war on battlefields. We don't like that, because it's our kids who go out there and do it, right? So in this case, sometimes it's necessary. When it's necessary, you do it, but it's not necessary. And so bring them down. And if you pull Iran out of the equation, that global alliance becomes very much weaker. I just want to say one more thing. Everybody really ought to go back and reread Hannah Arendt's Origins of Totalitarianism, because we've forgotten. It's tough. I mean, it's hard reading, but I rediscovered things that I'd forgotten. I hadn't read it since I was a graduate student in the 1960s, or was it the 1860s? I can't remember that clearly anymore when it was. But anyway, the things she says, I mean, the spectacular things she says about communism and fascism, about Hitler and Stalin. And, you know, people talk a lot about Sunnis and Shiites, about the unbridgeable conflict between them and so on. Well, it's true they hate each other. No argument there. Hitler and Stalin hated each other too, but they cooperated at least for a while because they had a common mission. Once the common mission was over, then they got back to basics. And I'll just leave you with my favorite metaphor for all of this. Jim says it all the time. It's The Godfather. The 5 mafia families fight with each other all the time under normal circumstances. They're competing for business. They're competing for control of territory. They're competing for personnel, all kinds of things. They fight, they blackmail, they kill. But when the feds come after them, the heads of the 5 families sit down around the table and they make a war plan. We are the feds. They have made their war plan. They are, at least temporarily, united in a common cause against us. They are waging that war. If we lose that war, and if we don't engage in it, we're gonna lose it, because there's a lot of them, and they have a lot of money, and they have a lot of means with which to destroy us. If we lose that war, as Sharansky said, you wanna know what life is gonna be like if these guys win that war? Look at the way the Iranian people live. Look at the way the Russian people live. That's what it's going to be like. That's the way we will end up if we do not win this war. And so there's no way out. They won't let us out. We can win or we can lose, but we can't walk away.